Branding for the Global Stage by Roger Grant, President and Chief Brand Strategist of Identicor Marketing. This presentation was recorded before a live audience at the Global Business Center in Calgary on April 24, 2012.
This is a joint presentation that we have this morning. So there's the marketing side of developing the brand, and then there's also the legal protection side of making sure that the investments that you've made in creating the brand, you're able to own that internationally. And so we'll start off on the creating side, and then, as Merrick has mentioned, Martin and Bonnie are going to give us the information around how to protect that. Now, to give you some context around creating a brand for the global stage, I thought it'd be helpful for us to have an actual case study, a time-tested, market-tested case study of someone here in Calgary who's done just that. So in this success story, we need a hero, and our hero is Dave Higgins. And what Dave did with his company here in Calgary, and this has gone over the last dozen years or so, has to be able to change the face of his industry on a global basis. Now, I have to admit, though, that the starting point that I had with when I first met Dave 12 years ago this month, I didn't get a sense of excitement initially. The name of the company at that time was Gray Interfaces. For some reason, I just didn't get a lot of excitement going. You know, I tell clients that when a customer first sees a company name, they start making judgments about what that company's about. And in this case, I was the one doing that. But once I got past the gray exterior, a very exciting story started to unfold. The work that Dave's company did was in the entertainment lighting business, and they had an amazing group of clients. Disney, Universal Studios, the big TV networks, all the big shows in Vegas were all clients of Dave's company, Gray Interfaces. The product that they made was in the technical background, behind all of those spectacular light shows that we see when we go to those areas. There's communication protocol that has to happen, so at just the right instant that spotlight comes on or the video display starts up. And it was Dave's company that was handling some of that communication order that took place. But where they were was Gray Interfaces was an expert in an old, proven, but an old technology, and maybe not the most sophisticated. It was called DMX. It's kind of like BMX, except you don't go over the handlebars and you don't have to dig the gravel out of your teeth. But that was DMX. Then, as I talked to Dave, an exciting story started to develop because Dave was very much a man of vision. You see, what he did was he took time away from the day-to-day operations and he looked ahead in his industry, what was going to be happening in the next 10, 15 years out. And he saw some things happening. From his customer base, he noticed that those big shows were looking for more spectacular kind of effects to wow the audiences. Now, the big companies in Dave's industry, what they were doing at that point in time, they responded by getting into Ethernet technology. And they were introducing expensive new gear that could do amazing things. And just as when Ethernet arrived in the computer world, was able to do amazing things, it also really lifted up the bar in terms of what was possible in that entertainment lighting world. But as Dave continued to do his looking around what was going on in the industry, there was a bit of a difficulty because that new gear that the giant companies were coming out with was very expensive. And there was all this old legacy DMX equipment that the companies couldn't just walk away from. They didn't have the capital budgets to drop it and 1 year later have all new gear. And so there was this gap. The new equipment is up here, the old stuff was down here. And it was at that point in time that Dave said maybe there's an opportunity somewhere in the middle. And looking at the possibilities of what Ethernet could do, he said, you know, if there's a company that could come up with a product that could bridge those two worlds, that could be an incredible opportunity for the next 10, 12, 15 years. And if the company that created that bridge came in, they could be in the position to dominate that market for more than a decade in advance. And then Dave took a look at what it would take to moved from that old technology up to Ethernet and realized, there's a lot of hurdles here. But as gutsy entrepreneurs do, Dave decided it was time to take that leap and to make a bet the farm investment in research and development to be able to be the company that could claim that middle space and create that market opportunity. And it was at this point, after Dave had made that commitment, that we had our first conversation. And, Dave told me that, we're confident, we think we're going to be in a position that we'll be able to solve those technical challenges. But what we really need is to make sure that all those investments that we're making, that they're going to pay off. That taking a product to the market and having no one buy it, that does not fit into our success scenario. And we are called gray interfaces, and we're known for old technology. We need to have something that's going to grab attention, that people are going to think of us as a cool, advanced company in this new Ethernet world. Now, this is, quite a story that's developing right now. I think it's a good entrepreneurial story. We've got a owner of a small entrepreneurial company, someone named David, and he's taking on the Goliaths in his industry. And we've got new technology, we've got innovation, we've got a big risk, we've got a potential big reward. Aren't you eager to know what happened next? I can hear you thinking, Roger, tell us what happened next. I can hear you just ready to call out and say to me, Roger, what happened next? I can almost hear you say it, but your lips aren't moving yet. And you want to say, what happened next? I can't tell you what happened next because you're not ready. We're going to hit the pause button, actually, on the Dave story because, all of us are going to get more interaction and more value out of the story if we put ourselves into Dave's shoes. So let's imagine that you're Dave. That you see this huge market opportunity that's going to look after your financial future for your company for the next decade, and you've got this big risk, and you've got this new opportunity you want to be able to claim, and you need a new brand, you need a new name. What type of a name do you need? So if you had your notebook and you were kind of jotting down your ideas, what kind of a name is it that you would need? So let's hear some suggestions. If you put yourself in Dave's shoes, what type of things would you want that name to be about?
Descriptive.
Descriptive? Okay, why descriptive, Stu?
Because I hate brands that don't describe what the company is.
Okay, so descriptive's one idea. What else?
Innovation.
Innovation? Innovation. I think there's a comment back here, too. So innovation's from two sides. So double innovation, okay. What else did the name do?
What the client wants to hear.
What the client, isn't that interesting? What the client wants to hear. Any other ideas? Memorable, excellent. Anything else?
Cutting edge.
Cutting edge. Okay, some good ideas. Now, one of the places this leads into is, how do you measure how effective a name is? And when clients ask me to assess the quality of their brand names, there's 9 different factors that take a look at, and some of them are mentioned here. They were mentioned from the floor. You want to take a look at how much meaning the name has, whether it's distinctive or not. We're going to hear a lot more about distinctiveness when Martin and Bonnie are up giving their presentation. The women at the back mentioned for us the memorability factor. We want to take a look at elements of word structure and phonetics. What kind of imagery and emotion gets surrounded with the name, the growth potential that's in place, and how it is for pronunciation and for spelling. So these are some straightforward technical kind of elements that we take a look at. In addition to those more technical terms, it's helpful to have kind of a high-level view of what the name needs to be. And one of the things that was required here for Dave's company, we needed to have a name that was going to be a little bit more exciting than Gray. We needed to position the firm as a networking company, and I know we were talking about being cutting edge and maybe highly technical, but for Dave's needs, he actually needed a name that was simple and approachable. Now, that seems like a little incongruous, doesn't it? Because it's an advanced technical product, but why would it need to be simple and approachable? Back in the 1960s, some elite astronomers looked through their new high-powered telescopes. They looked out beyond the moon, beyond the sun, into deep space, and they saw something they had never seen before. And then they were in that challenging position of, how do we explain what we're seeing? And they came out with a descriptive term, totally compressed gravitational objects. And when totally compressed gravitational objects were presented, only a few elite astronomers had any interest in what they were dealing with. The name was hard to understand and to get around. Then a new term was introduced, just 2 syllables, and totally compressed gravitational objects became a black hole. And all of a sudden, this very complex thing became approachable to the masses. Dave didn't need a totally compressed gravitational object name. He needed a black hole. If you've got a technical product, something that is really sophisticated, if you want it to get talked about by many people and spread throughout a marketplace, it needs to have a simple starting point. Because if you do have that simple starting point, here's what the name's going to do for you. It's going to win you a place in the customer's mind. It's one thing to bring a product to market. It's another thing entirely to get that product into the customer's mind. If the product doesn't make it into the mind, there is no sale. And if you win that place in the customer's mind, get it with the memorability that the name really needs to have. As an analogy, what that does is it establishes for your company, for your product, a loading dock in the customer's mind. So a place for the customer to receive more information, to store information, and retrieve information from. And this was actually really important for Dave's product because his vision had a fair bit of detail into it, and people needed to understand the vision to buy the product. So there was a lot of mental cargo that needed to be delivered in the sale. And so having a simple starting place that gives that loading dock in the mind, then all of that cargo is able to be presented. So what Dave really needed was more than just a collection of letters. He needed a name that would actually do something. And let's have an example here. So what you're seeing on the table here are 2 identical glasses and 2 identical vials. And the vials are filled with identical amounts of white powder. So let's add some white powder in here. Let's add some white powder in here. And 2 of the identical glasses filled with identical amounts of white powder. Let's add identical amounts of water. Now, there's a lot of identical things that are going on here, and you'd expect the results should be identical. But something different is happening. On the glass on the left, not much is happening at all. The glass on the right, look at that. The white powder is expanding, it's bursting forth, it's spilling over the edges. There are names that in the marketplace they do nothing. And there are names in the marketplace that work for you. There are names in the marketplace that the name itself can get the message out. Dave needed a name that would get the message out, that would actually go to work in the marketing rather than, do nothing like the white powder on the left is doing. And if you have a name that will go to work for you, just like we're seeing in this example here, some really nice things start happening that your accountant likes. You start earning a big return on investment from the money that you invest in creating the right name. And it shows up in a few ways. It shows up in higher prices, it shows up in larger market share, it shows up in more sales. And if you look long term, if you've got revenue generating assets that the company owns, what it also leads to is having a higher market value, because those names become valuable assets. Well, how valuable can a name become? Well, that's one of the questions that Business Week magazine asks every year. And they've got that issue that comes out at the end of the summer, and they analyze the world's 100 most valuable names. And the world's most valuable name consistently is Coca-Cola. Business Week magazine pegs the value of the Coca-Cola brand, which rests largely on the Coca-Cola name, at $70 billion. 8 letters in a hyphen, worth $70 billion. So if you invest in, come up with the right type of name, get the right type of name protected, and invest in that name, you're investing in the value of the company. So what does it take for a name to have this kind of working for you performance? Well, it needs to make the right impressions in the mind, in the heart, and also in the mouth. Let's start off with the mind. What the mind is looking for, when you first see something for the first time, you're eager for meaning. You know, that thought bubble you want to get working. You want to get the mental cogs churning. Now, there's a number of different messages that you can present. It might be a message of, well, what is it? What's it about? We see the name Syncrude. Oh, I get it. It's synthetic crude. Or maybe it addresses that question that's on every customer's mind, what's in it for me? Or why should I buy? And Quicken, that software that you might use at home to keep track of your Visa statements, does a great job with this name. It's a promise for the software is going to save me time. And the name Quicken has been a big part of the success in the marketplace. Quicken has consistently commanded a market share of 80%, largely contributed to because of the quality of the name. But it doesn't always have to be a what is it or why should I buy kind of message. Another option that you can have is to put a little bit of mystery in. And really that's what iPod did. It was all about an intriguing message. Like when we first saw it, like, what the heck is an iPod? But it did get the minds engaged and involved in. You know, another thing that our minds look for is, well, what can I remember? And we drive by a Husky station, and it's the dog that pulls the sleds. It's important to engage the mind. It's important to fill this bubble, because if you leave this bubble blank, you will not get the loading dock into the customer's mind. So that is a key factor. Also need to connect with the heart, an emotional connection with the customer. And why is that? Well, because people buy on emotion and they justify with logic. If you only have a name that sends out a logical message and doesn't have an emotional component to it, you're giving your customers reasons to justify their buying decision, but you're not creating the impetus for them to make it in the first place. Now, there are a number of emotions that that any business is able to tap into. One company that does a great job on the emotional side is Hertz Rent-A-Car. They've got the GPS option called Never Lost. And it taps into that fear that probably many of us have of, boy, strange city in the United States. I don't want to get lost on the wrong side of the tracks in a rough neighborhood. Fear can be a very important tool in the sales cycle, and you can put that in the name. On the more fun side is Ben & Jerry's ice cream. And the name that they give to their flavors are phenomenal. Chunky Monkey, Chubby Hubby, Neapolitan Dynamite, Economic Crunch, a lot of fun. But if you're moving into this emotional side, you also have to make sure that you don't run into a problem with mixed emotions. Now, the folks at CIL Paint realized that they had a problem with mixed emotions. So they would have names like romance and lavender lace. And, the women folk loved the idea of this putting romance on the walls. Men, who might be on the end of the roller having to put that on the wall, would have a different opinion. So the folks at CIL Paint decided it was time to tap into the male emotions as well, and they had a contest. And that contest was to come up with man names for paint chips. And my favorite one from the campaign was they took Spice Island and they renamed it Bacon. Bacon. So look after the emotions well in the sales cycle. Names also need to work out well in the mouth. They need to be phonetically pleasing. They need to be easy to say, have a natural sound, and 4 syllables max. Now, let's try this together. Rather than have me just describe it, let's have a phonetic experience. So on these next slides, you're going to see some names, and what I'll get everyone to do, like a big choir, is to shout out what you see on the screen. Okay, so here's the first name for you to, all of us in unison, to shout out on screen. Here it is.
Blackberry.
Okay, here's number 2. Number 3. Number 4. Pardon? And the last one. Okay, isn't that interesting? There wasn't any hesitation around BlackBerry. Everyone got Core Plan right. Tectera, and Core Plan and Tectera, a couple of organizations that I've named, but maybe the first time that you've ever seen them, and you're able to nail it right away. And if the name feels good in the mouth, it's confident, and it also provides a sense of credibility for the company. Now, there's also that other example, the car manufacturer from Korea. Next year it's going to be 30 years since these guys came into Canada, and we're still not sure how to say the name. 30 years and we're still not sure how to say the name. And then in my e-newsletter Brandscapes, I wrote a story on this. Hyundai, and the official pronunciation is supposed to rhyme with Sunday. So Hyundai is making some phenomenal cars these days. Like Consumer Reports says that, J.D. Power says that. But because the name still feels clunky in our mouths, they can't charge as much for cars with the same features as, Lexus, Mercedes, BMW, or maybe even Toyota. So that is a bit of a difficulty. And they're also not even putting their name on their cars anymore. Like, they're making the best cars they've ever produced, and they're not putting their name on it anymore. You want to have a name that's going to travel well internationally. Now, this, from a global point of view, is an example of the Hyundai name makes great sense in the Korean market. It's actually the name of a big conglomerate, and it's called, and it's the Korean word for modernity. But moving internationally, it doesn't have the right word structure for it to be able to be effective. So there's an example. Those of you that are the wine connoisseurs in the room had no problem here. Those of us less schooled in these matters, this was a bit of a mouthful. My friend David is in the wine business, and he's mentioned to me that, although Gewürztraminer is a great grape, is that it gets ordered far less because people don't want to feel confused or embarrass themselves or embarrass the waiter by saying it incorrectly. Names need to work in the mind, name needs to work in the mouth, and names need to work in the heart. So, thank you for your patience. Now we're going to get back to Dave. As you recall, we needed to position Gray Interfaces as a network company. Now, we could have taken a straight descriptive approach and put in the word network. Had I done that, Martin would have slapped my wrists pretty hard, because if you're highly descriptive in the names that you present, not only does it not have that cachet of creativity, it also is impossible, quite often impossible, to get a strong trademark for. So we needed to say network, communicate network without saying network. And so the thought pattern, creative process we went through was, well, how about a metaphor? How about if we could come up with a metaphor for network? And so that's what we did. And we thought about a pathway. So instead of a network, it became Pathway. So the company name, Pathway, and then to give it a technological edge, we put the word connectivity on the end. And then that breakthrough product that Dave was going after to create that bridge between the new Ethernet reality and old DMX in the middle, physically what it was a smart data port. And so we took the path from the company name and the port from smart data port and created Pathport. 2 syllables, 8 letters, alliteration, and yes, it does sound like passport, so that adds to its memorability from the very beginning, because it takes something in the customer's mind and twists it a bit. At the biggest trade show in the industry, October 2000, Lighting Dimensions International down in Vegas, Dave introduced a new company name, introduced the Passport as a new product, and the product won Product of the Year award. Like, that's a great achievement. Also, great thing that happened, fabulous rave reviews from the influential media in Dave's industry. Fasten your seatbelts. Next generation lighting networks are here. Came from Fourth Phase in Focus magazine. Tremendous things that happen. Now, it's nice to get accolades at trade shows. It's nice to get accolades in the media. But you know what are the endorsements that really mean the most? When customers endorse it by buying. And moving into that space with a new product, creating a new product category, the first people to impress in Dave's industry are the consultants that are writing out the specs of what type of equipment is going to go into those new theaters. Immediately after the trade show, those consultants took out their notebooks and they started writing in what was going to go in. Now, what they didn't write down was Ethernet distribution hub over such and such technical specs. They wrote in the word passport. The memorable 2-syllable alliterative word passport. And if you write in the word passport, you know, there's only one company that can fill the order. And this has led to a huge expansion, creation of a market, and passports being sold everywhere. The big hotels, the big theme parks, the big shows in Vegas, and even the Seven Seas. This is the Queen Mary 2, and when it was launched in 2004, the world's largest cruise ship, 21 stories high, and on board the Queen Mary 2, almost 100 passports. A great sales success. You know how Dave was thinking there could be a opportunity to maybe dominate a market? Well, for years, Dave's company, even though bigger competitors did come into the marketplace, sales market share more than 50%. And another interesting thing happened as the equipment developers were coming into wanting to get into Ethernet. They realized that Dave's company had figured this out. And they said, you know, Dave, rather than us reinvent the software, how about if you give us a license? And that created a new product, a software product called the Passport Protocol. Now, if this was as far as Dave's story went, I think it would be a big success. But another development happened last summer when Dave got a surprise phone call. And on the other end of the line was a big player in architectural lighting, a company called Acuity Brands. $1.8 billion company from the States, publicly traded on the New York Stock Exchange. And they called Dave up and said they wanted to come see him. Now, put on your entrepreneur's hat, big company coming in, you're going to sell lots of product. This is going to be a big order. That's what Dave thought. Now, Dave was right that purchasing was on their mind. But they didn't come to purchase a lot of gear. They actually came to buy the company. They came to buy the company. The entertainment lighting technology had migrated into the architectural space, and Acuity Brands realized it needed some of that technology. And rather than, develop by themselves, they said, we're going to find a company to acquire, and we're going to acquire more than just the company. We want to tap into a reputation. So as Dave was having those conversations with them, he asked the question, well, why us? Why did you come after our company? And this is what they told him. He said, Dave, we've done our research, and we've learned an awful lot about pathway connectivity. And Pathway is a gold-plated brand. A gold-plated brand. You know what's really nice about having a gold-plated brand? Is when a company comes interested in buying you, you're able to charge a gold-plated price. Now, the terms were not released of the acquisition, which was finalized in October. So I don't know if, the check size got up to the $70 billion of Coca-Cola or not. But I think it is fair to say that Dave has earned a pretty good return on investment for his investment in the branding world. And, looking out over the audience, there's actually a fellow back here who looks, quite a bit like Dave Higgins. So would you join me in a round of applause for our entrepreneurial hero, please? Merrick did mention Brandscapes, and if at the end, if you would like to receive my e-newsletter, Brandscapes, there's a number of Brandscapes readers here in the room. I'd be delighted to add you to that list, have a conversation. And now we'll turn things back over to Martin and to Bonnie. Thank you.
For more information about how Identicor can help your company with branding and naming issues, contact Roger at 403-685-2100 or visit identicor.com.